Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In the last video, we discussed about the concept of navigation properties and how we can use them in order to retrieve data from a database and insert new record. There are a couple of other things also left in navigation property, which we'll cover later. But let's understand how we can basically apply migration to my production database this time. While working with an entity framework code first approach, this might come into your mind that from development machine is fine. I'm easily running my command like .NET EF database update and .NET EF add migration to insert a new migration or to update my database. But how can we move these changes to my production server? Because that is my final goal. I cannot put them inside my development machine. So in this video, we are going to discuss those ways which are suggested by Microsoft in order to move these changes to your production database itself. Okay, let's discuss them one by one. The very first thing, the very first technique which we can follow in order to apply migration to production server is our same old concept of using a command line. I can basically use my command line and I can run these migrations on my prod server directly. Now, in order to run these command line into a production server, you need to have installed a .NET EF Core tools over there on my prod machine itself. And the command that we had used for my development purpose, the same command can be used, but that command should be part of my CI/CD process. So I should be basically running these commands as my CI/CD pipeline itself. So I can navigate back to my Visual Studio and I can show you how this works. So what I'm doing right now is we already have a database named as sample database into my database instance. You can see it's already there. Now let's assume that you are creating this migration to a new server itself. Now, since I'm working on my local development machine, I cannot change a new server name itself. But what I can do, I can simply create a new database name just to mimic the same scenario that my development part is completed. And now I'm going to insert these migration into my production servers. I'll create a new database name and let's give the name as sample database prod. Now I'll jump back to my terminal and from the terminal itself, I'll write a command and the command name is .NET EF database update. Now this .NET EF database update command will basically take a latest database name and the connection string from my app settings.development.json file. Again, it is simply something which you can understand that this should be a part of my app setting.json because development.json is for development environment. But again, if we are moving into production servers, we have to use some different configuration. But the major part of here is that whatever the configuration that you have defined into your app settings file, that will be taken care from this command itself. And then it will start executing these things against your database side. You can see when I execute this command .NET EF database update, it start creating a newer record or new database into my server. And if I review the command, the very first thing that it has done is create database sample database. You can simply see this that this is the part which got created and I am basically creating a new sample database which is the name as sample database prod. So in simple terms, whenever you are running with a migrations and if you want to move these changes into a production server, whatever you have done so far, you can basically use a command prompt. You can basically use a command line tool in that ecosystem. And based on that command line tool, whatever the database name that you have given, what are the server name that you have given inside your app settings file, you can run those commands against that app settings and you can see a new database has been created. But you need to basically install a EF core command line utility on the production servers, and these command, the one that we are writing it down into my terminal, should be a part of your CI/CD process. So that is the first way of applying the migration using a command line to any of the server. The second way, which is again proposed by Microsoft, is using a SQL script, and that is something which they recommend as well. We can generate a SQL script for an entire migration, and you can use the SQL script in order to review it, in order to give it to your DBAs, or maybe you can simply run those SQL script again from your CI/CD process. So let's see how we can generate a SQL script from these migrations. So I'll jump back to my terminal again. Let me clear out the window. And what I'm going to write it down is .NET EF migrations script. Now, this .NET EF migration scripts will basically create a SQL script of my entire migration. Since I am not creating any kind of parameter, I am not passing any timestamp, any starting point or any endpoint, it will generate the entire migration at all. I need to preserve this migration into any of my SQL file. So I can create a parameter name as output and give the file name as initial setup.sql. When I press enter, it will again build my entire source code, and this can be done into a development machine itself. So once you are done with the development machine development purpose, maybe you need to run this command, or this could be done on your production machines as well, wherever you want. Basically, the thing is that you need to generate a script for it. A .NET EF migration script will basically create a new file which is called as initial setup.sql. If I check a new file is created, which is initial setup.sql, and if you want to check the content of that file, you can simply use the cat command in a terminal, and you can see basically I am creating a new migration history table, I am creating a new user table, user profile table, and then I am also creating a department table and so on. If I navigate back to my Visual Studio, you can see the same file is there. And this is simple SQL script, something which we all are aware of. I can run the SQL script against my prod DB. I can give it to my DBAs. I can basically use this into my CI/CD pipeline. So whatever approach I am following, I can use any of the approaches in order to run these commands against my database. And this is one of the most safest way of applying a migration on production with an entity framework core. See why it is separate. What is this? Why it is important? Because these scripts can be reviewed for accuracy. And since you are applying into a production server, it might cause some kind of damage. So we don't want to do that part. So I can first review it and then I can run it against my prod servers. Okay. So I can basically run these commands. I can run this utility in order to make it work. Now you can notice that this is generating the entire script. But definitely this is first time it is good. But at later stage, you need to have a control of your migrations. You won't want to generate the entire script at all. Let's say in this database migration itself, I only have 3 files. In a database, add a department table and a student codes table. And now I want to have a specific migration, or let's say I want to create a migration at certain step. What I can do, I can simply again navigate back to my terminal. And this time I will again write a command .NET EF migration script. But before giving the name of the file, and let's change the file name as setup1.sql, I need to give a migration name as well after script tag. And this migration name should be the name of the migration which belongs to my file system. So if I navigate back to a Visual Studio, you will notice that I have 3 migrations: in a database, add a department table, and added student course table. Forget the timestamp. Just copy the second part of it, the command that you gave while creating a migration. Copy this command name, navigate back to your terminal, and then give the command over here. Add a department table and then change the file name because that file already exists into my database, into my Visual Studio itself, and then press enter. Now this will again run the entire migration and it will create a new file which is my initial setup.sql. And if you check this, now a new file got created which is initial setup1.sql. And if I check the content of that file, it only include the migration from a courses table, student table, and student courses table. And you can see that if I navigate back to my Visual Studio again, you will notice that after department table, I only have a single migration and that got included. And in that migration, I was creating basically my course table, student table, and so on. So if you really want to create a migration into my SQL side, after certain step, give that migration name, and then it will generate a migration that you had created after that step. So for example, if I again want to show the same thing to you, maybe I can again run the same command, but this time instead of giving an added department table, if I give the first command itself, which is my init database, and if give the migration name as init database, let me make it dot to SQL. And now if I go over there and write it down init database, you will notice that a department table will be also included as a part of my generated script, because now my starting point is in database, and whatever migration that I have created after my init database, you can see that is included. So now it is also including my department table, and then followed by my courses table, student table, and student course table. So the concept is simple, that whatever the migration that you want to create, you need to give the migration name, and whatever migration that you had created after that migration will be a part of your SQL script. The same command can be used if you want to generate a migration from and to factor. So let's say I want that my migration should be starting from added department table. Let me grab the complete name from it. So it should be added department table followed by added student course table. And again, I need not to put the timestamp. Name is enough. And this time I'm going to create the third file, which is name and initial db setup db.sql. And if I press enter, you will notice that a separate SQL file will be created. And that SQL file will only include a changes from my last migration. If I navigate back to my SQL again, and navigate back to Visual Studio again, you can see a third file got created, and it only include the courses and student courses table, because what I'm saying is that I need to run this migration from step A to step B. Okay, from department table to student courses table. Now if we want, because see, at this stage the output of my first statement and the output of my third statement looks same, because my migrations are created in such a way. But we can change this. So let me quickly create a new table inside my database just to mimic the same scenario. So I'll create a new item. Let's give the item name as sample table, and then create a simple property inside it, which is public int id and public string name. And once this is created, let me navigate back to my terminal again and quickly add a new migration, which is make. Let me check what is the content of my make file. So in order to add new migration, I need to write this command. I will write down make add migration, give the name as added sample table. And if I press enter, it will simply add a new sample table into my database, which you already know, which we've already seen in the past sessions, past videos. But now if I navigate back to my previous command, let's give it a couple of seconds. So executing, and now you can say my file got created. And let me first of all update this change into my database. So make update database, and it will again update the entire database. It will basically create a new instance. It will basically update these and into my database itself. But my main concept over here is that if I want to generate a migration now between two different layers, and let me use the method force, because my file already exists, and if I put force over here, it should override my existing file. So my output name is setup 3.sql, and since I'm using a force command, it should create the same file. And now this time the file that is created does not include the last migration, which is added sample table. Why so? Because I want to run a migration between two different migrations, that is with and to. So I can basically create n number of migrations. I can basically create n number of SQL scripts based on certain migration. And with the help of that, I can review them, I can deploy it, and even I can proceed with the SQL script to my servers. So this is the controlled SQL script. It's not something which acts as a black box like the previous statement where I'm just updating all the database at once. In the production server, you should be going with this approach, as it will give you a full control. But it's totally up to you. If you want to follow the first approach where you simply want to run the migration based on the command line, you can go with that part. Next, you can also go with a SQL script section, and that is totally up to us, whatever we want. We can also create an idempotent SQL script, which means that the SQL script can execute multiple times. If I navigate back to my SQL script as of now, the one that is generated, you can see that if I run this script for the very first time, it will work. But if I again run the same script next time, it will break because at that particular instance, my courses table should also have been created. And this script cannot run multiple times. But in a real scenario, I really want that I should be able to run this script again and again. What we can do, we need to provide another parameter into my script section, and that parameter name is idempotent. So I'll write it down, another flag name as idempotent, and then press enter. And since I'm using the previous command, it will again override the content of my initial setup 3.SQL and will update the same thing over here. You will notice that this time the script that got created also include an if not exist flag. So it will only create a new table if a table does not exist into my database, right? So this is again one of the recommended way that you should be doing while creating a script into your production instances, because definitely you have to run this. You have to basically make sure that I can be able to create this script or run this script multiple times. In a real world scenario, whenever you are generating a migration script for your production servers, don't forget to use this flag, which is idempotent, in order to generate a SQL script for it. So up to this point, we have covered the two recommended ways, which is my command line as well as my SQL script in order to apply a migration onto my server side. The third way is also there, which is called as bundling. And this bundling is a different way, is a unique way to basically apply your migration on the prod servers. So basically, with the help of bundling, I can create a single executable file that I can use to apply a migration to a database. Okay. There are certain shortcomings of this, but let me first explain you the part of bundling process. So I'll again navigate to my terminal, and if I want to bundle my entire database, I will write it down .NET EF migrations bundle. Now what it will does it will basically bundle my entire migration into a single instance. Now, what it will basically create is whatever migration that I have created from my beginning of my application and whatever I have done up to this point or maybe up to last point. With the help of bundling, you cannot have a controlled migration, but that is something which it will done automatically. It basically create an idempotent scripts internally. But what it will does, it will create a bundle. You can see right now it is building a bundle. A bundle is basically a self-executable file, and you can see a efbundle.exe has been created. Okay. And I'm also getting a help text that I should not be forgetting to include my app settings.json along with bundle in order to make it work. If I navigate back to my Visual Studio, you will notice that exe got created and I need to run this exe in order to apply migration. So let's check how we can do this. Let me create, let me come back to my project section and let me create a new folder, and let's call this folder as bundling ef core. Now I need to copy this efbundle.exe into my this folder. So I'll navigate back to my folder system, and once that is created, what I'll do, I'll simply copy the bundle which is created over here, which is my bundle.exe, along with my app settings file into my new folder. And if I go over there, you can see I am having this folder and put it over there. Okay. So whenever you are creating a bundling of an EF core migrations, you basically need to put a app setting file as well over there. Now in the app setting file, you should have a connection string also. So let me quickly open it. Maybe I can simply edit this file into my notepad, and I need to apply a connection string changes. Run it over there. I'll simply navigate to my terminal. I'll navigate to my Visual Studio, copy my connection string, copy from here, and then I'll put my connection string into my app settings file. So this is required. This is something which we should be doing with the bundling approach. And now again, let me change the database name. And this time, let me give the name as sample database prot new. Once I have this thing is processed, I basically have to navigate to my that folder. Now this folder includes two files. One is my app setting.json and second is my efbundle.exe. If I check the content of my app settings, you will notice it only consists of my connection string, and it basically has a new database, and that database is not created yet into my database itself. Okay. So what I can do, I can simply run a command which says efbundle.exe. And again, this command should be run as a part of your CI/CD process. And you should also have installed EF migrations command line prompt in your production servers. When I run this command and once I press enter, this efbundle.exe will execute against my database. It will be simply create a new database at all. And you can see that entire code got updated. So I have a new database prod new and I have everything in place. And if I navigate back to my database instance, I am having a new database altogether. Okay. So you can also follow this approach where you can simply create a bundle, and with the help of bundle, you can execute this statement again and again on production servers. Now, every time you create a new bundle, it basically consists of the latest changes. So feel free to apply or feel free to run this bundle multiple times because it basically consists of the latest changes at all. Okay. Assuming if I want to run a bundle against my Linux ecosystem or anything other than Windows OS, then what we can do. So in order to make it work, I have already installed a Fedora on my Windows using a Windows subsystem from Linux, that is WSL, and I'm going to run the same command that I ran on my Windows machine or my Windows terminal to create a bundle. So I'll write down, first of all, I'm inside the same folder, the folder that I have been using so far in this demo. First of all, let me build the entire source code with the command name as .NET build. Once I build the entire project, you can see this is actually building my project and it's the same command, the command that we were running on my Windows machine. Moreover, you can see that it is getting currently compiled, and let's wait for a couple of seconds till the process is completed. And once it is completed, I can again create a bundle for my Linux machine. Remember, while creating a bundle for Windows, the file that was generated was bundle.exe, and that exe will not be able to execute on any other operating system apart from Windows. So we need to generate an equivalent Linux bundle. We'll write down .NET EF migrations and then write bundle. Now this, you need to understand how a WSL works. So this entire is in a separate folder altogether. I'll run this command. It is basically going to create a bundle of my current entity framework core migrations. You will notice that after a couple of seconds, a bundle will be created. Okay. So let's pause this video and let's come back once a bundle is created. And you can see now a bundle got created, and this time a bundle does not have a extension as exe. If I navigate the content of a folder, it simply says ef bundle and there is no ef bundle.exe. Now it is also saying me a warning that don't include or don't forget to copy the app setting.json file along with your bundle. So the same thing we have noticed while working with a Windows bundle, that it gives me the same warning and the same file got created. The same behavior we will find out in creating a Linux bundle as well. Let me create a folder first of all. So I'll come back to one layer down my project section and I'll create a folder name as maybe Linux bundle. Now inside my Linux bundle, I need to basically copy the file that got created. So first of all, let me grab the name of that file, and I need to copy this EF bundle into my Linux bundle. So use a command mv and then EF code / EF bundle. So I need to copy this file into my Linux bundle, and with the help of this mv command, I can do this. I also need to copy this app settings dot development.json into this folder. And now if I navigate back to my Linux bundle, you will notice I am having two files. One is my app settings.development.json and second is my EF bundle. Okay. And EF bundle will basically create a new bundle, or it will create a new database into my current database instance. And app settings.development.json will be useful in order to get a connection string or pass a connection string to my bundle itself. Let's check the content of this file first. So the content of this file is similar. It's a connection string and the name is sample database prod. So we need to change it first. Let's first change the value of the connection string. So I'm going to use vim in order to change this value, and let's change the database name as maybe sample database and make it as Linux. Okay. And then let's save the changes. So now I have modified, and now you can see my database name is sample database Linux. It's not sample database prod anymore. Okay. So now I also have to basically rename this file itself, because the file is app settings.development.json. Let me rename this file with the command mv again. And this time I will simply use app settings.development.json to app settings.json. And now my file name got changed. Let's start running this bundle. Before running this bundle, I have to give this bundle as an executable permission. So that can be done with Linux with the help of this command. And now my simple step will be simply create .ef bundle and run it. Now this EF bundle will start configuration reading, it will start reading configuration from my app settings file. And now you can see that it started creating a database name as sample database Linux. And if I go to my same machine, because obviously I'm using a same database, you can see a sample database Linux got created. And it has all the tables that basically is a part of my original migration. So with this, you can notice that it is quite easy with an entity framework core to run the migrations against your production servers. Either you can go with a command line or with SQL script, or maybe you can go with a bundling. Just to repeat it again, the SQL script part is something which is recommended by Microsoft, but it's totally up to you. Whatever you want, you can do this. And all the three processes can be a part of your CI/CD pipeline. With this, I am done for this particular video. I hope you like this one. Please like, share, and subscribe so that it will keep me motivated to generate a new content for you. Thank you.